Welcome to the WW series for Canoeing Ireland, which is Workshop Wellness and Wellbeing. We have a rolling session on tonight. Basically, we've identified this as a topic that people were interested in. So rolling, the dark art, or is it? And once a survival technique for Indigenous peoples of subarctic, now it forms part of our technique and teaching in recreational paddling. It has a reputation of being a bit of a complex skill to master or teach. Tonight we have two educators who I associate with been passionate about demystifying and exploring rolling for sure in the conversations I've had with them. And so hopefully they'll be able to talk us through their thoughts on it and give us some direction and pointers. During the webinar, you can ask questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll be stopping for questions at the end of each of the 4 parts. Feel free to ask questions at any time through the Q&A, and we'll get to whichever ones we can. Sometimes we won't get to all of them. So if we're all good to go, we'll hand you over to our 2 panelists, who are Susan Doyle and Shane McElligot. Over to you guys.
Thanks, Steve. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to do a bit of a share screen here on PowerPoint, which will have some videos, just that keeps us on track a little bit, because you know, with rolling it can be very we're so passionate about it, and it's such an involved technique that sometimes we can chat too much, you know, and it can take us a little bit off track. So you're very welcome to this evening's session, and thanks, Steve, for introducing us there. So this session is an online session on rolling. Just before we start, I would ask you to be a little bit patient with us around things like online functionality and broadband and bandwidth and all that kind of thing. We've a few videos breaking down the skill a little bit, doing various things, trying to use photos. So sometimes that can be a little bit segmented, or it can be a bit tricky to get across. I suppose the best thing to do really when it comes to rolling is, you know, come to the instructor conference, which is in March if you're an instructor, or book in with an outdoor centre or a provider or something if you want to get that real life information. But this session really is just, I suppose, our thoughts on it and our suggestions for instructors, for people who are learning how to roll. So we'll just introduce ourselves first. My name is Shane McElligot, and I'm based over here in Roundstone. Coming at you with the magic of the internet, over in Roundstone in Connemara in County Galway. I've been an instructor since about 95, 96, and I started running instructor training courses from 2002 for what was Irish Canoe Union, is now Canoeing Ireland, and have been doing that since. I suppose here, like in Connemara, my job is split in twofold. I'm a freelance instructor. I have a small little business where I bring people out on the water, teach them paddling, stand-up paddleboarding and windsurfing. And I also work in the winter on a program called the Connemara Adventure Program, where we bring people on the water for 2 years through the winters, where they go from having no experience right up to instructor level over those 2 years. So that's just a little bit about me. I love paddling. At the moment it happens to be sea kayaking, but I love all the disciplines and all the different types of sports. So I'm going to pass you over to Sue now so she can introduce herself.
Hi, how are you doing? It's a real talking to a Zoom meeting full of people and not be able to see who you're talking to. So it's a bit of an odd one, I'm sure Shane will agree. Looking forward to kind of chatting to you this evening about my thoughts on the roll. I have to say this is the first time that I've ever talked about rolling without having a boat or a paddle or body of water beside me. So it's going to be a really interesting one. I know some of you guys, some people I don't know. I'm going to make Shane feel really old here now. I started kayaking in the year Shane started teaching outdoor or instructor training courses, which I realized recently is that just over half my adult life. So I wasn't really one of those lucky ones who started kayaking as a kid, started as an adult. And I was really lucky I got started in an outdoor education centre in Baltinglass. So as I was learning to kayak, I was working there and I was almost teaching at the same time. So as long as I've been into kayaking personally, I've also been teaching. Lucky enough that I kind of worked myself up along, level 4 instructor developer now. And on all that time, I've been a Canoeing Ireland member. So really, it's great to be here and kind of just give give something back with the webinar here this evening, and just chat about where we've come from. When I left the world of working in outdoor centres, I started my own business down here in Wexford, gopaddle.ie. So yeah, if you have any questions after the webinar, I'll say it at the end, but feel free to get in touch with us through website or Facebook page or anything like that. There's no problem there.
Thanks, Sue. So I suppose the topic for this evening is rolling, just to make sure you are in the right webinar. And what we're looking at really here is a couple of tips or ideas for instructors. And maybe if you're developing your own role, whether you're starting from the very beginning or you've got it and you're looking for a little bit more, this could also be for you, you know. Our aims for the evening really are, we've had three kind of distinct phases. Part one is to be introduced to what we know about rolling technique. So I'll underline that word "know." You know, it's always that's always a vague one in terms of when it comes to elusive techniques, and you know, especially for recreational paddlers, there isn't a whole pile of scientific research put into recreational kayaking. Come into high performance to make a boat go fast forwards, you probably will see more. But for something like the roll, there's a lot of conjecture and a lot of made up information, I should say, or seen from a point of view. And we'll just be very conscious this evening. I'd like to be very conscious this evening that this is our opinion, it's our experience. And like, as I said, I've been instructing for the bones of about 26 years. That's 26 years of mistakes. So like, it's just about learning from those mistakes from somebody else. So possibly you don't make the same ones when you're teaching it or learning it. Part two is about sharing an approach to the development of the role. So we ran a CPD a number of years ago for instructors. A TDU with Canoeing Ireland instigated a CPD down in Limerick, and there was some really good points came up in that CPD by instructors in teaching the role, and I'll share with you a kind of a synopsis of what that is, and we'll just go through those elements so that we can have a look at some suggestions and tasks for each part of the role as they saw it. And then part three, the final part, is just some considerations when you're teaching the role. Now that's for instructors really, but it's also if you're learning the role yourself, it's worth just tuning into that a little bit just to see, like, am I ready? Am I in a place where I can learn how to roll, as well as say instructors do like little safety checks on the site and such. So there are our aims, three parts. What do we know about it? How do we approach the development of it? And then some considerations when you're teaching it. So we'll get kicked off. As I say, be patient with us with the technology. We'll be switching over between myself and Sue throughout the session, different videos and such. So we'll do our best to make it as seamless as possible. And any questions that spring to mind, just pop them in the chat function, and Steve will address those to us at the end of each phase. So what do we know? Like all good instructors, you begin your teaching by breaking down a skill. So like the first thing we do as instructors is we take a skill that we want to teach and we look at what is it, what's happening, what are the specific movements within it that create a successful skill. And we're going to do this tonight through a video. All right. So beautiful magic of internet and video cameras and all sorts. I was out today in Roundstone, near Roundstone, in a beautiful little place called Urlock, and went out and did a few rolls. Now I've been told in our test here that the video kind of is a bit segmented when I play it through, but what we're going to do is we're just going to play it through twice. So this is kind of a roll as we see it. And just once more. Okay, I'm going to flick on now to what's happening here. So the first thing we're looking at when we start to break down a skill is, I suppose with the roll, really, you capsize, okay? And that's a whole other area we're going to go in a little bit later into that. Just getting that done and being successful and being happy in that moment can be tricky for some people, and we will talk about that later. But I suppose looking at the mechanics of the roll itself, we look at this setup. Now, a few people have different words around each of these actions. And I'm sure Sue will interrupt at any stage if she has extra ones to throw in, interrupt me. But in this setup, you can see here, there's things like the wrists are being presented higher than the halfway mark of the boat. Both hands are out of the water. The paddle is clear of the water, reaching up, and you can just about see the white helmet underneath, which is coming up. So some instructors refer to a C to C. So like the body is making a C shape up towards the surface of the water. But basically what's happening is the paddle is getting clear of the surface of the water. Just something that I'd like to introduce you to into a topic if you haven't heard of it before. There really are, you know, when we come to demystifying the role a little bit, if I want a better word, I'd like to introduce you to 3 topics, okay? So the first topic is this idea of an anchor or a stabilizing force, right? Now, if you can imagine what's actually happening in the role here is there's a torque motion being pushed through the boat, okay? So the boat has to twist. Torque is a fancy word for twist. So what's actually creating that twist is what's happening under the spray deck. We have some idea that there's something to do with the knee there. In this case, the right knee, rolling with the right paddle. So the right knee is driving the boat into that torque motion. We might be able to suggest that the left foot is doing something possibly. The seat is possibly doing something. Hip pads and backrest are doing something. We're not really 100% sure of what's happening there, but we do know that one of the things that's really driving it is that right knee in this stage. That's what's putting the torque in the boat. But that's an action. That's an action, and the power for that action has to come from somewhere, okay? And I think this is one of the most, I suppose, misinterpreted movements in the role and learning the role, is that the action isn't a pull, it's not a chin up. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to place an anchor, an anchoring force, a grounding force out from the boat, create as long a lever as we possibly and safely can without hurting ourselves. And that allows us then to put this torque force into the boat, to twist the boat up, okay? An analogy with that would be like somebody kicking a football, right? So we've got some footballer here. I don't know, he used to be famous. I think he's one of those lads. But you can see that the grounding force, or the grounding action, or the anchor, is the foot that's next to the ball, the foot that's not going to be doing the kicking. And that's one of the issues when it comes to rolling, is that people think that the anchor arm is actually an action arm, and they end up pulling on it, which is not really accurate when you look at people rolling a lot and people who are good at rolling. That anchor tends to actually be almost quite static. So, you know, think about it like kicking a football. The anchoring leg isn't doing a whole pile of movement. It's kind of static. It's kind of stable in one place, and the other leg then, that gives the other leg the force and the power is generated through the standing leg to give that other leg a big hoof and drive that ball further, faster, harder, whatever is needed to be done more effectively. Watch it again. So when you see this, I think I circle this here. So there you go. There's the setup. Just slightly caught that bit late there. But so the setup, and then we'll go through to the end. Right. And now we'll look at the anchor and the lever. This one, I'll try to get the pause. Okay. There's the first technological problem. When you have 2 videos that are the same. See if this is the one. Yeah, okay. One more time. Let's see if Shane can do it right this time. Okay, it's not working for me, but you get the idea. We're creating an anchor force. In order for our leg to do a lot of work, our driving knee to do a lot of work, and to finish off the technique, you can see here, there we go, anchor, lever, torque. Okay, so in a very simplistic way, your anchor was placed as far out from the boat as possible, that's safe with for your shoulder. That created a lever moment, which allowed me to kick with that knee that's facing us at the moment. Sue is going to take the screen in just a moment and just talk to you then about finishing the roll, because her finish is much better than mine. So I'm going to stop share here, and then Sue will take over. Over to you, Sue.
Thanks very much, Shane.
Worries.
This fellow. Okay, so I'll just play this video a couple of times. Just let me know, Shane, there's that coming up on the screen there. Yeah, okay, great. So there's just a front view. So you can see how at the start here, even though I think myself and Shane have probably never rolled together before, it's quite a similar roll. We come around here, paddle set up, hands out of the water, and then it's clear of the water there, sweep in action. And this is the bit I kind of want to talk to you guys about, I suppose, is that finish. A lot of people come up, got the roll, they've done everything right, and then end up kind of falling back in again. I like to kind of think about following that paddle with my body, and especially with my head, bringing it right around and finish and looking down at the paddle. I think that's a nice way to help your body unwind as the paddle's moving around. I'm going to try and show it just from a side angle here now as well and see what I play through there. Okay. It also puts me in a nice position, I feel. If I could just bring it back here. So setup's the same, paddles, wrists clear of the water, like Shane had said, bringing the paddle out, coming up out of the water. So I'm following that paddle with my head, come back up upright, but you can just see there at the end ever so subtly, there's almost like a little sweeping motion back forward again, or just that little bit of a brace, something to do with the paddle at the end. And I just call it the finish. That you have your kind of, some people, I think if you watch some American videos, they'll call it maybe shedding water. The other thing to be mindful of is my top hand, which is my left hand. I think maybe you can see it better in this video. So this is my left hand, and this one stays on the left side of your body, so it's not crossing over. A lot of people that I've helped rolling with is that top hand is coming across over their right knee, and then the paddle goes behind them, and then they're falling back in on top again, or they're out of position to brace and to be able to finish. Ideally, when you've got the hang of this, you know, you won't just paddle up, look at your paddle and do nothing. You know, you'll be progressing into paddling forward or whatever the next action is. But I think just to get going, it's important to think about the finish as well. And that's something you can start and practice even before you've done the roll, you've gone upside down, and thinking, well, where's my hand going to be? I'm going to be looking down at my paddle. The other thing that's really helpful with following your paddle, it means that it's kind of getting you out of this position where some people are maybe lying back and looking at the sky, and that can be really unstable, a way to come up. So you've just fallen over, you're trying to right yourself, and now you're lying back in your kayak in an unstable position again. So using your head to follow the paddle around and finish in that, but I just call it like a little finish position there. So, okay, right, Shane, I'll stop sharing there now.
No worries, I'll take it back. So just to give you guys a heads up now, just going to summarize that last little bit that we've just done. What we'll do is you might just start letting Steve know if you have any questions by inputting them into the chat function, and we'll take any questions just on that phase alone before we move on. So to summarize our own thoughts on this, we have a setup position. So we're breaking down the skill of rolling. We have a setup position where the hands, wrist and paddle are clear of the water. In this particular roll we're doing, the paddle sweeps out to an area which is, we're really searching for an anchor point, and the anchor or the grounding force really is that distance from the boat, which is just long enough where we can get as maximum leverage as we possibly can, but it's not an active blade. It's really like, it's almost like your body weight is resting on that paddle for a moment, which allows your legs to kick the boat upright. Then your body follows up after it, and you're looking at the paddle, as Sue says, to finish with a flourish, you know, to actually go through and finish that technique without leaving the passive hand to cross over the center line, keep it on the same side as it always is. So Steve, just if anybody has any questions, you might let us know, or else we'll move on.
Yes, and just let people know in terms of how long we're going to be. We're going to give this, we've kind of planned for about an hour and a half. It depends on how much discussion we have in terms of questions and things like that. Currently, we don't have any questions in just yet, but we just got one there now. Okay, we got some in here now already, flying in. I struggle to understand what's the difference between sweep and C to C. And I presume they mean by a sweep roll and a C to C. So what is it?
Sue, do you want to take this one? I see you smiling.
Well, because I just said to Shane earlier, I bet one of the questions we'll be getting will be, what's the difference between a sweep and a C2C roll? So it's a great question, and there's loads about it. You know, you look up, you go to any YouTube, it'd be like, do you want to learn sweep? Do you want to learn C2C? So the sweep roll, I suppose, while you're sweeping the paddle, while you're initiating the paddle out to the side, you're already asking the kayak to turn over using your knee. Okay, so you're kind of, as soon as you start to move the blade, you're also asking the kayak to move off of you. With the C2C paddle, you start in the start position, you move it out independently away from you. And then once it's there, you create that kind of anchor point that Shane's talking about. So paddle down, knee up, and kind of like a nice little meet, turning looking at each other. People then ask, I suppose, which do I teach? And I think each role suits different people, different body types, different shapes, different heights. And I suppose it depends on the person that's in front of me, whether they want to learn the C2C or the sweep. The sweep roll is nice because it teaches people to roll off pressure. So at the start, you're finding that pressure from the surface of the water, but once you kind of progress in your roll, you'll be able to find that pressure anyway. It could be like a foot under the water, and once you feel pressure, you can initiate the roll then with your knee. I hope that helps.
Good answer.
Cool. Yep, that seemed, yeah. Because I remember there used to be all sorts of different names for different roles back in the day, and they were all called different names. We won't go into them, but you know, you'll hear.
Sea kayakers have loads of roles. Cool.
So then you have another question here is, how much of an emphasis do you play on a climbing angle during the sweep? So that's climbing angle of the blade. I have seen it done with and without a climbing angle.
Yeah, that's so I'll take that one. So the climbing angle is in relation to the leading edge of the paddle blade. So if the leading edge of the paddle blade is flat, and the paddle is flat, it travels across the surface. Now you see both Sue and I in the role that we did there, the paddle was out of the water the whole way out to the anchor point. So the climbing angle or the angle of the blade didn't really matter. We placed the paddle out for an anchor point. So, but if you're doing a sweeping roll of some kind of any description, I would see it as being slightly better to have a slightly raised leading edge, just a bit of a climbing angle, especially when people are learning, so that there's less tendency for the paddle to dive. Because as soon as the paddle has dived, you tend to lose that anchor point a little bit. It tends to be, the grounding force tends to be slightly less because it's just that little bit further under the water.
Cool. Okay. And then there's two of the things that come together, especially about that diving. So why does the paddle sink down to the water as it hits the bottom or river bottom? And how do I stop the paddle diving on the roll? So they're pretty much linked there in terms of that. So if any of these questions are kind of linking into something you're going to go through later, we can leave them, or if not, like work away.
There is another reason for why a paddle might be diving, and that reason would be that somebody's pulling on it. Remember, it's not a one-arm chin-up. We're really looking to visualize that paddle as an anchor placement, as a grounding force. And this is one of the big misinterpretations of the role, that somebody puts the paddle out to the side and pulls off it. The paddle's just going to go straight to the surface, and you're not really going to get a whole pile of tension out of it unless you're very strong. Cool.
Okay. So then there's a couple of things are kind of linked in here in terms of they're talking about kind of what's the power that gets you upright again. Is it the knee that's doing the work turning the kayak, not the hip flick, as referred to in most videos? Because this phrase, the hip flick, comes up a lot. I can see you smiling. And then any tips to help with that torque, that knee kick, again, to stop pulling downwards? Is there something else there that's going on with the body or the blade or the boat?
Okay, I'm going to answer half of that question, and Sue's going to answer give her talk as well, give her opinion on it. So yeah, we will be showing little tips as we go along this session in the next part, where we look at opportunities or tasks or little challenges to improve that knee kick. We'll bring you back to this idea of how much force to develop the torque, right? So like the anchoring of the paddle and the force. If you think about it like a ratio, so if you're relaxing your body onto the anchor paddle, let's see if I can come back to anywhere. I can just use a diagram to explain this. Okay, right here, this is a really good one. Okay, so where it says anchor there, right? There's a ratio here, right? I don't know what the ratio is, and it's going to change. And this is what Sue was trying to allude to. You teach the paddler, not the skill, okay? And some people, you can see that this demands a certain level of flexibility. And bodily flexibility, and then strength in a particular way, right? To be able to kick a boat upright is an explosive movement in a particular direction. And, you know, that's a practice technique, but there are also some people who the anchor force would be greater than their ability to kick with their knee, because they may not necessarily be flexible around the midriff. Okay, now I'm not a sports scientist. I'm sure there's people out there who can explain this better. But when I'm teaching a paddler who might be quite stiff around there, I would actually be a little bit more leaning towards a slight bit more pressure on the paddle, which allows them to have to apply less pressure through the knee. And it's that ratio that you can't really figure that out until you're in that position. Really, you can kind of have tasks as an instructor to see it, to set it up initially, but it's not until they actually get on the water and make it happen that you start to do that. And then you kind of say, okay, well, if that's an issue, this is the way I need to gear this roll. So if you think about it, there's no fixed, like, I'm not going to say 15% of the power comes from the anchor force and the rest 85% comes from your knee. There's a distribution there depending on the person. Sue?
Depending on the person and the boat and the paddle and the length of the paddle that you're using. So it all kind of plays together. It's one of those horrible questions that you're going to ask a kayak instructor and they're going to give the answer, it depends. I suppose, why do I use the word knee drive? I remember when I was learning to roll, and the person that was helping me, he was lovely, Tim was his name, and he's like, I wanted a hip flick, and I could visualize myself with like a hula hoop, and I can't get the hula hoop to go around me. So I was thinking I was to do this mad motion with my hips and I was going to come up, and it never really worked. Okay, and then as I got into being a kayak instructor and everything, and I kept hearing myself use this word hip flick to people, and they would kind of look at me at the same blank face that I looked at my kayak instructor. And then I kind of think, well, what am I actually doing? So when I started to think about it, and then talking to other people, and, you know, like Shane and people who paddle in other communities, because I'm a river paddler, but maybe talking to sea kayakers and what they were doing, and realized that the action is coming from your knee, not so much from your hip. Yes, my hip is connected to the seat through the hip pad and the back band, and it does play a little bit into it, but really where I'm getting that force from is coming from my knee. So I really think about taking that knee towards my chest. Now, I've also seen people take their knee out of the tie brace and bring it through the straight out. That. Okay, so your knee is coming to your chest while connected to your tie brace. Okay, and that's that motion. You can also put a little pressure on your other foot. So between you bringing that knee towards you and pushing on the other foot, that's really starting the motion to get that torque that Shane's talking about, that twist, to get that kayak to flip off you. And that is just the foundation of it. If you can do that, like, everything else will come so much easier. Steve, you might have to keep us on point with these questions, because I don't even remember.
No, that's all good. I'm going to keep the last two because there might be a little bit more in that one. But yeah, it's also the way when I'm kind of pretty enthused about making sure boats fit people, not like over tight, but just that when you're having some of that stage, that they should have a boat that fits them, to allow them that engagement, that they aren't pulling their knee up to the straight out. So cool. Okay, we have two more questions. I can hold them for after, but if you guys want to continue on the next bit.
Okay. So we're going to move into phase 2, which is like the composition of it, right? And I'll tell you a story about the CPD that we ran for the TDU, and it was down in UL a number of years ago. I actually forget the year. I think it was around 2016, 2017. Sue, you might correct me if I know you were there. But we basically got a host of instructors together. I think there was around 30 in UL, and we went into the pool and we looked at the breakdown of the roll, and it was a super interesting exercise for me to be a part of. I facilitated the discussion around it. I facilitated the sessions, and I rang 4 instructors before I ran the session, just to ask them about their thoughts about rolling. Actually, Sue was one of them. I had a phone call with Sue, and I wrote down loads of notes and kind of came armed to the session with all of this information, which was great. And went to everybody and just said, hey, what's the story with the roll? And they all kind of came back with various different thoughts and ideas, and it was brilliant. And after that, what I did was I was trying to be a diligent facilitator, and I was trying to put all the information together, and I managed to synthesize it down into one thing. And I had an intention of sending it out to all of those people, but of course, life got in the way and it didn't get there. But the concept that I made behind it, and this was just, remember now, this is me just summarizing some great instructors' input on a full day session or half day session, and their thoughts, and came up with a kind of a pyramid. And everything at the bottom of this pyramid is the base need. Okay, the pyramid falls apart if it doesn't have these base things at the bottom. You come up with different words. You can come up with your own words for each one. And those elements, I called each one of them an element. And basically they were what constituted or what a paddler needed in order to be able to roll well. Now, it's very important to imagine that some people will actually have an awful lot of these, just, you know, like youngsters will have an awful lot of confidence upside down, possibly without even you having to make it happen or suggest it happen. Maybe they don't, I don't know. But anyway, so one of the elements would be confidence upside down. That's the basic foundation. So people are happy to be upside down. The other one is this idea of what's happening under the spray deck. You hear Sue mention knee drive. I'm using the term torque for the result. Something happens under there that's, you know, knee drive is most of it, but there's other little bits in there as well that we're not 100% sure what happens. Orientation upside down was another element, and these three things constituted the basis, the foundation of a roll. So orientation upside down, which way is forward, which way is back, which way is left, which way is right, because it's all upside down and it's in water. Up around the middle there was the paddle path, like getting out to that, or sorry, paddle setup. So getting those wrists out of the water, as you mentioned earlier. The paddle path, getting the paddle out to that anchor point or the sweeping roll, whichever one you're using. And then this one, which came from the instructors that I actually rang and interviewed beforehand, which was the relationship to previous paddle strokes. So it's like the relationship to previous learning. Okay. And finally, then the synthesis of it all was putting it all together, linking all the elements to, you know, even having exercises and tasks in place to link all those elements together. So what we decided to do in this session here for you guys this evening was Sue and I are kind of going to tag team on each of the elements, give you like what we think it means, and then maybe some suggested tasks, like a kind of a light suggestion of tasks or suggestions around it. Sue is going to go first with this concept of confidence upside down. So Sue, do you want to chat through that?
Yeah, I guess that's, if you're not comfortable being upside down, well then, like, is the role for you, do you know? So that's the first thing that we got to work on. Like, loads of people want to come and get their head around the role, but then you know, how long can you stay upside down for? So that's, I suppose, what we're talking about. Little tasks for learning to be confident upside down. Just upside down, face in the water. How long can you stay there for? You know, either holding onto a friend's boat or onto the edge of the pool, or having somebody beside you that can kind of turn you the right way up again. I suppose the other way that I think about it is, if I was to, when you're upside down, you know, the heart rate's going, maybe if you're in the river and you're in the sea, so it's a dark place. And then the idea of being able to calm your mind, that you can take a little bit of information in, is really important. If I was to lock you in a dark room, say you had to learn something off by heart while I'm banging on the door going, come on, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. You know, it's going to be really difficult for your mind to focus or to think clearly at all. So it's able to get upside down, calm your mind, be relaxed in that area. And then loads of people, loads of good instructors out there have their own little games and tricks and things that they use to help people do this. But I suppose just some of the ones that myself and Shane have put together for the presentation tonight, you know, just falling in, either falling in sitting inside in the kayak or sitting up on the back of the kayak. Shane has a really good one here, snorkeling from inside the kayaks, you know, getting a little snorkel mask on with a pipe, sorry, Shane, a snorkel, not a pipe. Trying to come to the surface, below, can you breathe, right? Anything that's going to make you kind of relax inside the boat, but while you're upside down, swimming into the air pocket, capsizing with the spray deck on or the feet out, re-entry upside down. So that's a really good one. I like to get people to try, have the boat upside down beside you, you're standing in the water, and see if can you get yourself back in, leave the boat upside down. So you have to orientate yourself. Where do my legs go? Where do my head go? And I think if you can think all through all those steps while your head and your face is underneath the water, that means you're already starting to relax. Your brain is working, you're thinking things through. Okay, standing on the boat, being upside down, just counting for a few seconds, or maybe just blow bubbles, you know, anything that you can do upside down. Another thing that I like people to do is when you're upside down, do nothing, just do nothing, and come up and ask yourself, how did that feel? Like, was my heart going? I was like, oh, actually, I was okay. It was fine. Oh, I was making shop lists for dinner, but then you're grand, you know? You're ready to move on to the next step. Go for it, Shane.
I love that, shop list. And all of this is just to, I suppose, get people to just feel what it's like to be in the boat as well. You know, like that's really important. I had an interesting one a couple of years ago. I was teaching somebody how to kayak, and they the helmet actually made them claustrophobic. So every time they went upside down, they just got freaked out. And she eventually said it to me, and we took the helmet off. And I was standing in the water next to her and capsized, and no bothers. It's really like, for some people, it's such smallest of things can actually put them off. Boat might feel too tight. Steve mentioned the size of boat earlier. Like, it's confidence upside down. There's so many factors in it. It's important to get your client or your paddler to talk to you. The second element in that was this idea of what's going on under the spray deck. Now, this was in a bit of an enigma. In this CPD, what we did was, in Limerick, we went into the pool for some of the session, and what we started to do was we started to take away parts of the boat and getting people to roll. So we had good rollers, like everybody was able, but most people were able to roll. A lot of people were close to it, and we took away the footrest, still able to roll. We took away the backrests, still able to roll. We took away one of the thigh grips, or take their knee out, and they were still able to roll with that driving knee, which we showed in the video earlier. When we took that thigh rest out and put all the others back in, they really struggled. Okay, so that kind of told us by process of elimination that knee drive was really, really important. It whatever was going on with the hips, like the bum on the seat and the backrest, we just didn't really we couldn't fully measure that, but that driving knee was super, super important, like a huge element of it. So that's how we figured out the driving knee. A question I'd ask you, I'm not really sure about the answer to this, is do hip pads help or hinder? Maybe you might throw some answers into Steve there later. I'm not 100%. I know they stop you from rolling around in a boat that's too big for you, but maybe you might have some suggestions from your own experience, and let Steve know. Some tasks that you can do, be like the tap rescue or the Eskimo rescue. People have different names for that, where the boat comes over, somebody capsizes, you tap the boat, you tap your own boat, you turn your hands outwards to protect your knuckles. Another boat comes over in a T shape beside you, you use the front of that boat to come up. Like, you can use that skill, or you can stand in the water beside someone and hold the buoyancy aid and just get them putting that torque force into the boat while you just take the weight of their upper body off the skill, right? So that you replace the grounding force or the anchor force with something else. It could be the side of a pool, a rock, possibly a float or a paddle float or something like that, or hold their hands if you have permission to do so. Here's a little thing that a floor exercise, because some clients love floor exercises that they can do when they're not in the boat. So it's pretty simple. Lie on the ground. I'm just using the yoga mat here to indicate that my body's at 90 degrees. Okay, just that's one thing you have to be mindful of when you do this floor exercise. You can see my left hand is resting flat on the ground, and I'm positioning myself with my hips rotated over towards me, as though a kayak had partially or almost fully capsized. And then you simply just flick those hips there, Susie. There you go again. I do that knee drive. And up it goes. So this is just a technique that you can use on the floor to practice this. You can see I'm being quite careful about my body, not leaving the body go back too far, and pulling up and just coming up slowly. So I think it was Ronan O'Connor from Ardmore showed me this one. I'm not sure where, I know he had seen it somewhere else, so I'm not fully 100% sure of the source of it, but it's just a nice thing that people can do. And the idea is that you have minimal pressure through that anchoring hand. You know, you're just trying to use that knee drive to rotate the lower body. Oh, all right, Sue, orientation upside down. Over to you.
Yeah, so I suppose, and once you've got comfortable being upside down, it's just being able to move around back there. You know, usually when we fall in, we've lost our balance, we lean back because we want to lean back away from the scary thing, and we end up finding our place on the back, ourselves on the back deck. So can you get yourself from there to sit forward again? That's absolutely number one. Main reason is you want to be able to pull your spray deck to get out, and if you're lying back, that's going to be really hard to do. Okay, so come forward, be able to reach your spray deck. Then little exercises you can do from that then is, you know, when you're upside down, Can you move forwards? Can you move back? Can you move right? Can you move left? So actually I was in the pool today, and one of the girls, I asked her if it was okay to just video what I mean by that. So I'll might share that there, Shane.
No problem. It's up to you. It's over to you.
Thank you. Next video there, sorry, actually goes the other way. Okay, so this is Colette, she's in her boat, so you can't really see, she's lying back, she went forward, she's getting her hands out to the right, she's getting her hands out to the left, and then she's tapped to say she's happy to come up. Okay, so that for me would be the first steps of seeing how my kayaker feels when they're underneath the water. Can they perform simple tasks? Can they move their own body into simple positions, lying back, lying forwards, out to the right and out to the left? Because I suppose if that foundation isn't there, then it's kind of hard to build on. So just one more time, she went forward, she's leaning back, out to the side, and tap to come up. By getting those hands out around to the side as well, that's the start of our setup position. You know, maybe you can see your hands here. So just practicing getting those hands right out, being able to wrap your boat, your body around the boat. Thanks, Shane.
No worries. The main bit here. Okay, so that's that task. And what's really nice there with Sue is Sue's chatting about linking that in to something that's going to be in the future, you know. So we're there with somebody who's paddling quite early in their paddling career, and you're already giving them tasks which are just games and which seem innocuous at the moment, and they're connected to something further on down the road. Okay, so in terms of paddle setup, then this is really important, so people know how to set the paddle up before, during, or after the capsize. Obviously, when they're learning the role, it's before. Maybe as they get a bit better, they might be doing it during or after the capsize when they get quite good. So there's a lot of instructor terminology around this, like reach up, the wrap around, you know, where your body, you saw Sue there when she was getting that paddler to get her hands out of the water, her body was wrapping around the boat, wrists out of the water, or C-shaped body. Now that's an interesting one with the question earlier about a C to C roll. I remember meeting Mick Hopkinson in New Zealand, and he was talking about C to C in terms of the shape of the body underneath. So you imagine yourself seeing up, which then becomes a C down as soon as you start to roll. And I know it has different meanings in different parts, but it just goes to show you that some of the language we use in kayaking when it comes to complex skills like this, it gets varied and it gets a bit muddied. So that C shape of the body I'm talking about is when somebody's completely upside down and they're reaching their hands up out of the water to set up a paddle, or to get into the paddle setup. I tend to teach this on very shallow water or even land. I jumped out there today and just showed you exactly what I mean by this. Now, we have to be very careful when we're teaching this, that, you know, a person's shoulder is touching the ground there. My shoulder is touching the sand at the bottom there. And you just want to be careful that their wetsuit or their dry suit or their nice kag isn't getting destroyed. There's beautiful soft sand here in Connemara, and gives me the opportunity just to set up. And I like that idea of a little bit of water splashing in somebody's face. So it starts to build their sensitivity around what's been asked of them. You can do this on land. You can do this out on the water if you like, in deep water if you're standing next to the person. And it's just getting into familiarity with positioning the paddle and reaching those wrists up to the shear line, the halfway mark on the boat where the footrest nuts are usually lined up. Over to you, Sue.
And then I suppose the position of where's the paddle going to move from. I can't remember what the next slide was, Shane, but yeah, maybe just if you could flick back and forth between those two pictures for me. So we have our setup position. If you get the opportunity to sit into a boat like Shane has done there and move the paddle out away into the next position, you'll notice that you're actually pushing the paddle away from the boat. So that's, I suppose, the one thing. What did you call it, Shane, earlier? A chin up, a paddle chin up.
One arm chin up, yeah.
One arm chin up, okay, yeah. People kind of get their paddle set up and then they go to pull down and they think this is going to just, you know, it's going to be magical. This little paddle is going to bring me to the surface. It's not. So it needs to move in a particular position, and that's to generate either to go to the C to C roll out to here where we can get that anchor point that Shane mentioned, or to start that idea of like that surface tension that you kind of sweep, that you're getting a little bit of grip off the water, so it's out away from the boat. And I would encourage you, maybe if you're helping somebody to roll, or if you're trying to learn to roll, get someone to hold on to the side of your kayak and lean out to the side and practice that sweeping the paddle away. You should feel a nice big stretch here. You can see in the photo there of Shane, you can imagine under his right arm there's a nice big stretch. So you're set up position and you're sweeping that paddle away from you. So that's what we would call the paddle path. Where's the paddle going to go from? And each type of roll will have its own paddle path.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue. And links to previous skills and movements. Okay, so there are a few links when it starts to come to the roll, like there's the tap rescue or the T rescue or the Eskimo rescue, depending on what you want to call it, for the knee drive. That's all building familiarity with the movement. I am going to focus on one here, which I think is a little bit, it's overlooked, and then it's a lot of people might leave it out or might see no use for it, and that's the sculling for support. Now, when it comes to these kind of sculling and bracing skills, like the Inuit people have it. So if you're into Greenland paddling at all, obviously those people are just phenomenal at different types of balance positions. Like the balance brace, for example, is one of them. And they're really looking at how the tension works in the boat and through the body. But because sculling for support is in our syllabus, I just want to go through it a little bit. So have a little video here. The first one is on sculling being ineffective, and when people come to me sculling, this is generally what I see. Okay, I just have to get this cursor working here. So you can see here that the actual scull is useless. Yeah, it's not actually doing anything. And what you'll notice is you know, one of the big mistakes, not mistakes, but one of the big things that people are doing is they're actually, they're edging, right? You can see my body is leaning away from the paddle. You see the way my head is almost vertical. So I suppose it's what people would normally call edging. Yeah. So my head is leaning away from the paddle. So now all of the pressure is on my left leg. So my knee drive is on the left side. It's on the opposite side to the paddle. As you're looking at the photo here, my knee drive is the right side. As you're looking at it, it's my left leg that's doing the knee driving. So what I'm actually doing is I'm actually trying to hold myself up, right? And the paddle really, it's doing nothing. It's got nothing happening. I may as well be doing it in the air, and that's a nice task for somebody if you're edging. As we come into a more effective, and you know, I'll take critique now on my sculling, right? Because it's not something that I do an awful lot, but you can see the body now is leaning. You can actually see the pressure on the paddle here. Yeah. Now the difference here is that when I come up, it's the near knee that's actually going to do the driving. Okay. So when that scull is finished, it's actually that knee which is doing the driving. Now, what's really interesting about this, linking your roll to this technique, is you can actually scull from upside down. You can scull from completely upside down, back upright, once you're familiar with this knee. And in some ways it's nearly easier. Yeah. So just, you might try that the next time you're out, have a go at it, see which knee is doing the work when you're sculling, really commit your body weight to it, and see the effect of it. Just an aside for anybody who's interested in sculling, when it comes to sea kayaks, I tend to use my whole body. I tend to use my whole body to scull. It's just, I just find it easier. See an awful lot of people just using their arms. I just use my whole body to scull in the sea kayak, but that's just something a little bit different. Maybe you might try that sometime.
If I could jump in there, Shane, as well.
Yeah.
And if anyone is using their sculling to enhance other strokes that they have, when you're finishing that scull, always try to finish on at a forward stroke. So you're thinking about bringing your paddle to your knee. Okay, so you're lifting your knee and you're finishing on a forward stroke. Because some people I see practicing that sculling and then finish it back here, where they're going to be more likely to be off balance. So if you are having a go at that, that's just something to think about.
Yeah, and of course that then protects your shoulder also. You know, you're less likely to leave your hand go back behind your shoulder. Absolutely, Sue. That's spot on. Okay, so see if I can work. I think I was doing this one, Sue. Was I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Or both of us, maybe. But
yeah, chuck in whatever. So we're into the final element, which is linking it all together. And this. So you've built up, like either as a kayaker or as an instructor, you've created situations where you can sort of almost, for want of a better word, attack each of those elements, so that you're building up familiarity, you're building up confidence, and you're building up that term muscle memory. I know there's no such, well, possibly no such thing. Talk to somebody, scientist, I don't know, but that familiarity with the movement, correct movement and good movement, around the psychology of it. So now it's time to start building. And really what you should be looking at here is timing. Like, you know, when does that knee drive? When is the paddle placed? And I think that's what some of the questions earlier were kind of alluding to, is if I'm doing a sweeping roll, like when does the knee drive start? Or if I'm just anchoring the paddle, as Sue and I's demonstration showed there, like, you know, getting the timing just right, just when the paddle is best anchored. And the other thing that the linking the elements together will put out there is that idea of good repetition. Okay, so good repetition is repeating good practice. And Sue and I had an absolute agreement on this. And we say, if somebody isn't getting it, rather than semi-drowning them and giving them mild stages of hypothermia, you know, you just pull them back again and you come back to some of the earlier movements and consolidate those and then move it out into the deep water. So the way I do this is I actually start in really shallow, protect the shoulder, as I mentioned earlier, soft sand, or put an old buoyancy head under that shoulder, and just get them to get used to the movement. Now, one of the biggest misinterpretations when I'm teaching this is people think that in that shallow water I'm actually getting them to roll up. I'm not. Notice in this demonstration here that it's just that initial kick. Okay, a kayak is really, really reluctant, especially with something like a freestyle boat, but even a sea kayak, it has, most of them have chines, even a rolly hull, a round hull, they generally don't go over very well on land. So you're just getting that kick and that paddle movement. Okay, you're just getting that timing set up as best you can. Okay, is this a video? Yeah, okay. And then you can start introducing, what I start to do is introducing it into deeper and deeper water each time, really slowly. You can see I have maximum support. I'm in no rush to come up there. You're building people's sensitivity to the water on their face, up their nose and their ears and all that kind of thing. And you're also just introducing them to slightly deeper and deeper water. Now, in place of the sand here, you can hold the paddle for somebody, or you can get a friend to hold you. I've a shortage of those guys. They've all left me. but you can get people to help hold the paddle for you in that anchor position to take, you know, just to get used to the movement. Sue, have you anything to add to that?
Yeah, I suppose down here on the Slaney, if we went over in the mud, it would be a foot underneath. So I don't get an opportunity. I think that's a really nice way to do it. But often, if you go back maybe just to the start of your video there to show that the position that you were in, Shane. Oh, sorry. In place of go let yourself fall right over it there, and you set there, pause it right there, lovely. So you can help somebody by just maybe holding just under their armpits, their shoulders, or their buoyancy aid. I like to maybe hold people just above the surface of the water. It's a similar position to where Shane was earlier in the shallow water. Their ears are out of the water so that you can talk them through it. And they can watch where the paddle is going. So they're watching to make sure their paddle is flat, or maybe they want to have a climbing edge or something like that. That's what you've talked about, and that they're swinging it right out. So you're just learning that paddle path, okay? And then you can start talking to them, like you can actually talk to them because their head is above the water. Well, at what time now am I going to introduce the knee drive? Are you going to wait till the paddle's all the way out? Or are you going to say right now as you're sweeping, and then lowering slowly, deeper water? I let them fall in a little bit more. I also use paddle floats. I think they're a really nice tool to have. I kind of have one here. I don't know if the sea kayaking community would know what a paddle float is. A lot of river boaters might know. So it's just like a paddle float with a gap in the middle, and you can put a paddle into it and blow it up. And you can start doing all these steps very, very slowly, because the paddle is going to stay on the surface of the water, and you can kind of practice each element, I suppose, individually until your timing is right, until you have it nice together. So
cool. Awesome.
I think Steve has some questions first.
Yeah, so just what I'm going to do is I'm just going to summarize that bit, and then if you guys have any questions, just pop them towards Steve there, just as I'm synopsizing what we've just done. Good old Zoom. So the elements, okay, as I said, this was a collection of information from a bunch of instructors at a CPD, a lovely crew of people. And the elements, the way I synopsized that was a little pyramid. And I really have to apologize to anybody who's in tonight's webinar that was at that session that I didn't send this to you after. It might be a surprise to some of you. That's you know, you get paid for a day and then you're off working somewhere else every other day after it, and you don't get a chance to send it all out. But anyway, the foundation here, the bottom bit, confidence upside down, what's happening under the spray deck, orientation upside down. So they are like the fundamentals of any rolling skill. The middle bit then is you're developing that idea of getting from a setup to the anchor point, or, you know, whether that's a sweep or just a direct positioning. And then linking it to some relationship to previous paddle strokes. And then finally, just thinking about how you're going to synthesize that with your kayaker, with your paddler or yourself. How are you going to put it all together? And we've just given you some suggestions. I nearly half drowned you in mud on the Slaney. That's not a good idea to do, but over here in Connemara, where the sand is lovely and firm and the water is 27 degrees year round, and, you know, there's people ready on the beach handing you cake once you're finished, like, you know, it's a bit easier there. And of course, swimming pools as well are a great place for that, if you have access to one. So that's the middle phase. That's phase 2 done. In the next bit, we'll take some questions very shortly through Steve, and then in the next bit, we'll be just looking at some suggestions for instructors going on. So Steve, over to you there.
Cool, thanks for that, guys. Just a couple of quick ones. Someone said, is the C2C or sweep more suited to white water? And I think I already know the answer to that. It has 2 letters or 2 words and starts with it's.
It depends.
Yeah, I would, if you don't mind me jumping in here, Shane, I'd probably say if I had to choose, again, I'm a real believer in choose a role that suits the person that you're teaching, your body shape and your body type. But I would say the sweep role, because the sweep role is teaching you to find paddle pressure. And when you're capsized in a dynamic environment and white water and if everything's moving around, you know, just getting that paddle pressure, and then you can initiate your role from there. So I think that one is the one lot that you're going to be using when you move to whitewater. It's what freestylers use. They're the ones that are upside down most of the time. They roll off paddle pressure. The paddle doesn't have to go in any particular direction. Yeah. And
I would have said the one that works most for you.
There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have said it's I think Shane's point about engaging the wrong knees ties in with lifting the head problem. And I think to lift the head, you need to engage the wrong knee, and therefore start to reverse the torque needed. Do the guys agree with that one?
Spot on.
Lifting the head is a thing, and you probably might come into that in troubleshooting. But in terms of that, you agree with that one?
Spot on. So that's a really good point. I'm going to see if I can find a photo back here somewhere. Okay, so reason a person's head is lifting, you can see here in this position, I'm setting up. My left hand is going to be the anchor hand for the roll, which means my left knee is going to be the action knee. Sue, have I said that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what happens when people roll, sometimes when they're learning, is they engage the wrong leg and they're trying to get air. So in order to get air, your head has to come up. Now, remember what I said earlier, like it's almost like every action has an equal but opposite reaction. You have to get that energy from somewhere. And when you're trying to get your head up first to breathe, you're pulling off the wrong knee. Okay, so the knee drive comes from the wrong side. In this case, the right side, the right knee, a high knee there as it's in the photo. And what that causes is the boat to stay absolutely flat. Okay, now I have seen people rolling with the head up, but they've engaging the correct knee. Okay, so that's the head is a symptom of something deeper. And the analogy I'll make is that you go into the doctor with a flu, okay, and the doctor says stop having a sore throat. You can do nothing to prevent that. So if you're telling somebody keep your head down, keep your head down, keep your head down, they're doing their best. They just you're treating a symptom. You're not treating the root of the issue. So the root of the issue is they're pulling off the wrong leg. Sue, are you okay with that explanation?
Yeah, 100%. To lift. So I suppose I think about it, if I'm lifting my right knee, I'm kind of engaging that right side of my body, and that's why I like to turn and look for that finish and looking down. I can't do that if I'm pulling on the wrong knee. Another nice exercise that you can do with people if you're helping them to roll, or you can have someone do with you, is Hold the boat up on its side, you know, when you're on that side and your head's not quite in the water. So to keep your head out, ask yourself, which knee am I using? And you'll feel that you're pulling on that top knee and you're even trying to pull the kayak out of the person's hand. And relax your body and use that down, that would be underneath the water knee, then you'll just see it so much easier. So just to play around with that. It's a really nice thing actually to do at the start. And I like to show people how it feels to get it wrong before you even start teaching them how to do it right. So they'll know themselves when they've done it. They can say, oh, I think I had the wrong knee there.
Thank you to that person for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Cheers.
So there's two things which are linked here to sculling, which I think we touched on it for a second there. And it says, what about looking at the paddle when sculling? And then, does sculling work the same in river and sea kayaks? Because that's a topic that's just two questions there. If you gotta leave, we can just spend a little bit of time on them, or convince something later on.
You know, it's probably good to look at the paddle when you're sculling. Like, it's quite a static movement in this case when we're looking at balance. So it's probably good just to look at the paddle. I always find that question, especially when it comes to sweep strokes and forward paddling, like it's like what's the perfect answer? And there kind of is no perfect answer. If you are looking at the paddle all the time when you're sculling, you probably just give yourself a head injury, you know, like a neck injury or something, if you're fully focused on it. It's like forward paddling, like, you know, in recreational paddling, they say look exactly where you want to go. And now I'm a sea kayaker and I love looking at the environment around me. So like my forward, you know what I mean? Like what job are you trying to do? So maybe when you're sculling, you might just be looking straight out. Like, you might be looking right in the division between the two. You might have your head down. It's kind of up to you. Like, I wouldn't say there's an absolute specific answer to that. And does it work in whitewater kayaks as well? Yeah, that full body sculling. Give it a shot. Like, tell me I'm wrong, you know, come back to me, email me and say, hey, I tried that in a stopper in Clashganny the other day and it just didn't work at all. It was a disaster for me. But just the one good thing about sculling is it takes a lot of the weight off the boat, your upper body weight off the boat. So things like body tension are a little less needed. So experiment with it, see how it works for you. As long as it's safe for you, it's your shoulder especially, it's all good.
Yeah, cool.
I think if I just could jump in there on sculling as well, I think it's paddle back, when we talk about kayaking in general, paddle dexterity and body awareness and how to control our boat and our blade. And I think sculling is a really good exercise for that. I don't think I've ever really sculled in a hole because I never really want to be in there. I'm always working to get out. But sea kayakers maybe using a different environment. But I just think to learn paddle dexterity, to learn about body position and body control, it's a cool little trick, I suppose. Maybe using the word more so than a stroke for those kind of things.
Yeah, I think sometimes I see people going far too far back on the back deck, and that can expose the shoulder. So to try to keep, as you guys said, that kind of slightly more forward, that knee engaged, makes you a little bit safer for not being so overextended. So that'll be one thing on. Other questions we have here, which we may get onto this one, is any advice on learning? Sorry, we'll come to other, other types of roles are coming in here. So any types of, is it okay to use an extended paddle roll for sea and river? So palada, sometimes it's called palada rolls, or, you know, altered setup position. And any advice on learning how to do a hand roll if all else fails? So two types of roll there, which are in the world of rolling.
So extended paddle rolls, what are you doing? That's my question to you. Like, what are you rolling for? If you want to become a freestyle kayaker, a paddle roll or an extended paddle roll probably isn't the best thing in the world. But the paddle roll will definitely get you up, and I've definitely reverted to paddle roll for some of my clients in the past who've been looking to become instructors or looking to pass a level 3 skills assessment. You know, like, does it work? Does it get you up? Does it put you in place? And as Sue mentioned earlier on, different body types, different flexibility, different strength. What works for people? You know, what works for people? And if the aim of your role is simply just to get you up, and you want to go out paddling on a Sunday afternoon on a class 2 river, or you want to go out on Saturday and just paddle some sea that's relatively benign, go for it. Whatever works for you, just make it happen. Greenland kayaks, like they have 32 different rolls, and you can learn how to roll and throw a spear at the same time up there, you know, like, you know, what are you using it for? And they develop a roll for that, you know. So whatever works for you. The hand roll, I did, you know, I tried a hand roll on that freestyle boat today. I broke the backrest when I jumped into it. That just goes to show you how long it's been since I was in it. And I tried the hand roll and it failed miserably. Well, not miserably, it was a fairly miserable roll, but I was like, I'm not going to put that up on video tonight. But I have two things about the hand roll. First, it's a savage thing. If you're rolling really well and you have the roll dialed, it's an excellent next step for people. The second thing is I've seen like a lot of whitewater now, people are showcasing running quite large waterfalls and throwing the paddles away. So they need to be able to hand roll, okay, to make sure you get that correct Instagram video or whatever, footage, TikTok, whatever you're at, FaceTube, U-Book. And the other thing about a hand roll I'll just say is like, I never really put a whole pile of practice into it myself, because if something's bad enough that I've lost a paddle, the chances are I'm swimming. You know, and that came from, like, I was running creeks, like whitewater was my origin, and like if my paddle goes and I can't hold on to half a paddle to roll up, I don't think the hand roll is going to work. So I never really put a whole pile of effort into it, but I'm not discrediting it at all. It's a lovely skill to have.
Cool. So we'll just take one more.
You can answer this one, Sue.
Yeah. So can you show the head and body position when you roll? So they're looking for that head and body position in the water.
I could go back to one of my videos there if you want to.
Oh yeah, that's better actually, because you have them queued up. Yeah.
Let me just share the screen. Is there anything in particular about
it just says, can you show the head and body position when you roll? It's probably where the starting position is, maybe. I think they might be talking about.
Okay.
Clarify that in the question if anyone wants to put in. So I think Shane mentioned it in terms of seeing the white helmet at the start of one of his videos, and then
okay,
where the body would be relative to the boat.
Yeah, I guess it's probably harder to see on mine there, but my body is wrapped around my helmet. Maybe if I'm only 5'2", but if I was a little taller, maybe I could just get the tip of my helmet up to the surface of water, especially without a bouncy aid on. You're a lot more flexible. Bring it around to there.
So maybe relative to where the boat is. Is it under the boat? Is it beside the boat? Are you leaning towards
beside the boat? That's a really, really good point. Actually, I'll go back and maybe forward on here, because again, I'm only 5'2". My arms aren't very long. So when I was actually learning to roll, people were saying lean forward. So I was actually going forward towards the spray deck handle, and my arms, I just couldn't get them out to the side of the kayak. And I was thinking, how does everybody else do this? Or do I just, you know, it's just not for me. Am I not tall enough to get to wrap your body around to read? So when you're upside down, you're wrapping your body around. You're almost thinking, bringing that helmet to the surface of the water, and that just gives you so much space. It's very hard to do when you're upright in your kayak, because you're just going to capsize. But if you can have someone hold on to the side of your kayak and practice it, or when you're upside down thinking about wrapping your body around, and then you have so much more room, you have so much more leverage, and especially when you're looking at the paddle, you can unwind around with it. I hope that helps the person that's asked the question.
Your knee drive works so much better as well when you're not leaning all the way forward. Like you can see Sue's body is quite opened up, as I would call it. It's about 90 degrees to the boat. That allows her knee to actually do that, nearly kneeing yourself in the face movement. You know?
Cool. Okay. So we'll leave one or two more of these for later on as well. There's some something that's quite in and relative. That's okay. So perfect. So we're going to move on to the last bit, I think, which was you were saying we'll have more questions at the end as well. An opportunity for that. So keep them coming in as well. So Q&A.
We've been on here for over an hour, so anyone is still with us. Thanks very much, by the way.
Yeah, well done.
I feel like we're just so nerdy, just sitting here talking about rolling.
There are 70 very patient people sitting here.
Maybe they've all gone for dinner. I don't know.
So do a pulse check.
Enda did say that you must be more than 5'2", Sue, because if so, it means I'm not the 5'6" I thought I was. Thanks for that, Enda. Okay, so and then also someone said rolling is an infinite topic for discussion again. So yes. That's dead right. We can go on to ad infinitum with this. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the next bit, and we will look at the point of view considerations for instructors, which will come back to some of the questions then as well. Thanks.
That's a very good point about ad infinitum, and you're absolutely spot on. And, you know, like, we're trying to fit some topics here into an hour and a half Zoom session as best we can. So there will be stuff that we'll have left out, just trying to cover as much as possible, but at the same time, just give you all very kind of like, not simple, because it's not simple, but definitely just some definitive things that you can take. So in terms of considerations for instructors, look, I'm just going to blast through this. Sue's going to interrupt me whenever she wants to add in stuff, because this is quite PowerPointy, but it's not that long. And remember, ask Steve some of those questions you have as you go along. First thing in terms of considerations for instructors you need to think about is safety. So you're setting, and this is considerations for instructors, it's also when you're rolling yourself, okay? Check the depth. Real simple thing to say, but Jesus, like, you know, it makes a big difference. And you don't need that much water to roll, but, you know, it just has to have be free of obstructions or snags under the water. Check the water quality as well. You just want to be sure that with clients or customers or students or club members, whoever you're teaching, that, you know, you're not putting them into completely polluted water that they wouldn't be used to either, you know. Finally, just the equipment. All right, so make sure footrests are adjusted correct length. Now, when I say correct, you know, some people like a tight boat, some people like a loose boat, some people don't know what they like. So, you know, just make sure that their ties are able to fit into the tie braces, and they're not able to take them, straighten their legs inside in the boat completely. Tie braces are an interesting one. I had a full-time student with me there for a couple of years, and she struggled to roll when the tie braces were in the factory setting. So the tie braces were pushed all the way forward. And when she pushed them all the way back to the last setting closest to her, every time, boom, 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 rolling, no bothers. It's an interesting one to play with. I hadn't thought about it until she brought it up with me, but there's something there, and I don't know, like, it's just basically, if somebody isn't getting it, try adjusting them and see if it makes any difference if you have the time. The last thing I'll say is paddle integrity. You know, just be careful of the paddles you're using. That's all I'll say. Some people put a lot of force, and especially if you're using paddles in the sand like I was using there, you know, you probably don't want to be using nice carbon fiber or fiberglass blades. They're quite expensive, you know. Try to use something a bit cheaper, a bit older for that one, before they go into the water to do it in deep water. I'll flick on to the next thing. Paddler readiness is something that's so important. Like, as an instructor, are they ready to learn this skill? Are they going for it? Do they have enough time in the boat? By what I mean by paddle and boat literacy is, like, when you're basically watching them move, are they aware of the effect every action has? Not so much to the degree of they're able to drive the boat at unbelievable speeds or turn, maneuver, do anything like that. It's just that, are they at that stage of development where you can start to think about introducing the role to them, and just start to find those measures yourself as an instructor, or in yourself, like, what does somebody need to be able to do in order to make the role a bit more accessible to them. The strength and flexibility ratio is something that's quite interesting. And I alluded to that earlier about the power in the anchoring hand or on the anchoring paddle. You know, if somebody is more flexible and less powerful, possibly, they should be able to do that knee drive movement a lot better. If somebody's stronger with less flexibility, they might have to rely on that anchoring arm a little bit more. And that's where you see people starting to come using extended paddle strokes, like the pull-outer roll, for example. Possibly I'm generalizing there, but you get the idea. And finally, Sue, what do you mean by headspace?
Yeah, I think, you know, people might want to learn to roll. They're really keen to learn to roll. All their peers are learning to roll. And then you ask them to capsize for that first time, or just even capsize and take your spread egg off, and the panic is written all over their face. You know, it's just not there yet. And a lot of us, I did in the early days of my teaching, going, okay, right, sure, look back in, we'll try again. Let's just keep moving forward, because you want to learn to roll and I'm here to show you. And it just never ends well. You know, you might get a couple of steps ahead, but I think really spending that time at the start, either being honest with yourself and saying, look, I'm still a bit panicky when I'm upside down, or I can feel my heart going, or all I'm thinking about is getting there, and saying it to the person that's helping you. Or if you're rolling already and you're still feeling that, well, can you go back and address that issue? Because that is really, it comes up all the time. And I suppose a lot of our symptoms that Shane talked about, like bringing our head up early, that's kind of be like a physical manifestation of how our mind really is underneath the water. It's telling us we're not really as comfortable as we think we are, because we're like, Jesus, give me that air, you know, when we're driving our head to the surface. So yeah, just if you're helping somebody, make sure they are in a good headspace for this. Or if you're doing it yourself, or if you're having problems with your own role, well, ask, how do I really feel when I'm upside down? You know, can you take this? There's no shame in taking 6 steps back and fixing a little problem at the start. It'll just make it better when you start to move forward again.
Yeah, and your voice as an instructor around somebody who's struggling with that is really important, like your tone of voice with them on the water. You know, you need to start using language and imagery that's there in a supportive way. Like thinking of unicorn, put yourself in the room with unicorns and fluffy rainbows and all that kind of stuff before they capsize. You start to use positive imagery as best you can, positive wording. Paddler comfort. So, you know, this is a big one for me with rolling. I teach a lot of people how to roll who, you know, their gear isn't the same as mine. You saw me there in the video today with a lovely dry suit, you know, headgear on, like a typhoon neoprene hood on under the helmet. Earplugs are a big thing for me, as you can see in this photo here. Yeah, the hood was on because I'm completely bald, for those of you that don't know me. You'd never think, would you? Earplugs are really important for me because I've ectosis, so if water goes in, it doesn't come out and it gets infected. Those surf ears are they're a life changer for me. They've added 20 years to my instructional career. To be honest, I can't be without them now. I can't be underwater without them. Spoke about the paddle already, and I know Steve has alluded to the boat fit there. Is it too big, too small? Are the hip pads too tight? Is the footrest position wrong? The tie brace position we've spoken about already. How we learn. This is an interesting one when it comes to teaching people the roll. The roll is a very tactile exercise because all of your senses, really, like your primary senses, like your vision and your hearing, are taken away from you, and even your ability to communicate back. You've either got hypothermia, you've swallowed a load of water. So it's a very tactile exercise. And when people come to you and say, "Oh, I only learn by doing, and I that's how I learn," this is actually the ultimate test of it, to be honest with you, because not people tell you that, but they actually learn by visual cues, okay? Or they might learn by taking in information or hearing the paddle. There are also a lot of challenges for self-observation in this task. Like when you're paddling forward and your boat is veering all over the place, the visual cue is your goal point. But in a roll, there is no visual cue for if you're going right, left, too deep, if you're pulling with the hand too much. It's a tactile cue. It's how you feel what's happening. So a lot of the analysis is based on really poor input. So what tends to happen is a huge amount of misinterpretation of the success of the skill. So they come halfway up, which you all know that you come halfway up in a roll, it feels like you haven't come up at all. You come halfway up, they're partially successful, but they've no idea that that's happened and what they did right in the skill. And that can be a tricky one for people learning this. When does rolling capsize practice happen? So this is another interesting one. I had a discussion with Sue about this. So sure, this varies, but it usually happens at the end of the session, right? We're going to keep you from getting wet and cold until everything is done. So a person has paddled a river, or they've paddled on a sea kayaking trip, and they come to the end of the session and they're wrecked. Yeah, they might have stiff and tired muscles. They might be thinking about what they have to do next. They might be in a good headspace. So it might be worth thinking about adjusting that a little bit. Okay, now obviously the cold thing is paramount, right? You don't want them getting hypothermia, especially at this time of the year if you're out kayaking. In the summertime, maybe less so. But just have a think about where you're positioning that session. If you have a rolling session as part of a standard club trip or a journey. Might be better to do it in the middle. I'm starting to do mine about 60 to 75% of the way along. So people are warmed up and they're starting to get fluid, but it's also not the end, they're not completely wrecked. And then we finish the last bit, then they get rewarmed on the end of the paddle. It's just something to think about. How many attempts do paddlers get before enough is enough? Here's a big one, and Sue just mentioned it there. Don't be afraid. If people aren't getting it, pull it back. Think about the foundation of that pyramid. Their confidence is going to get shattered if they can't roll, right? And confidence underwater is a huge thing. So come back to the beach, come back to the hands on the paddle, come back to holding the buoyancy aid, work on those core skills, that timing, that movement, before somebody just has ingested so much water that they can't even give you some feedback. And how much is effective, how much of that practice then is affected if they're completely uncomfortable and their boat is full of water. So, you know, just watch out for those things. There's only a few more left, okay? Bear with me. When you're coaching, we have a habit as instructors to really want to help people. It's a good habit, okay? But the thing about it is that your mouth is directly linked to that helping gland in your brain, okay? And what happens is they come up and we just want to help and we think we're helping with words, all right? And you're not actually, okay? You're probably really holding the person back. So what I would say to you is observe first an awful lot, more than you think. Okay, and what you're looking for there is repeated actions or behaviors. Somebody capsizes, they roll up, you say, oh, can you do that again? Or somebody capsizes, they don't roll up, you help them, say, hey, can you do that again? That was nice. Okay, have another go, have another go. And all you're doing there is observing. The words you're using aren't, do you know what you should do now? And it's not until you've completely analyzed it and observed it and found repeated mistakes, then you start to go, okay, we need to try this. There's one thing that I learned a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I had one client who was really struggling with the role. I bought a camera with a screen on the back of it. This is an expensive one, but you know, you don't have to get an expensive one. It doesn't have to be waterproof. Like you can do it from the shore as you get another person to help them rescue or whatever. It's got a screen in the back of it, so you can take footage of somebody rolling and show it to them. But the real cool thing about this is you can pause it and start to analyze where their hands are. Is the boat moving first? Is the paddle being pulled down too soon? And that is just, your naked eye misses an awful lot of those things. And because the roll happens so fast, it's really hard to pick up on the minutiae of all of those little elements. So if you can at all, a camera with a screen on it is just brilliant. And I'm not telling you that's what you should go out and buy, but it just makes such a difference as a coach when you're coaching the skill. And then when you do give feedback, try not to overcomplicate it. Do your best to keep it. I have 3 words: reach, stretch, kick. That's it, right? So reach the paddle up, that's the setup. Stretch it out to the lever point. Stretch, that's the second part. Kick, and they're up. Yeah, so reach, stretch, kick. And the problem is going to be somewhere along one of those words if there is an issue. Yeah, so real simple sound bites. Demonstrate the skill a good few times. Instructors I've noticed some instructors are a little bit H2O intolerant. So they start to wear for comfort rather than wearing for effectiveness. So I include myself in that sometimes. Okay, demonstrate the skill a good few times for its entirety. Let people see the whole thing. Be prepared to stand in the water for a long time as an instructor to help people and to support them. So wear maybe a double layer underneath if you know that's coming, or a good dry pants or a dry suit or whatever you have to keep yourself warm. And just remember the pyramid, constantly pull them back. If they're not getting the skill, there's something missing. So pull it back, go back out, try it again, pull it back, go back out, try it again. And finally, praise the effort, not the result. If somebody gets a roll and they come up, that's brilliant. If it's a terrible roll, send them back in, get the bases, but praise the effort. It's not about rolling, it's about rolling well, okay? And whether that's a Palata roll or a Greenland roll or a back deck roll or a hand deck roll, whatever they're practicing, just praise that work they're putting into it. Good practice is better than a poor successful roll. I know that sounds like a little bit of a contradiction, but it's going to stand to them in when things go really wrong. Okay, here's one that's kind of left out a lot, and I promise you now this is the last slide, and I've got 2 more little videos just to show you. Basically, if somebody has rolled, what can they do? Okay, what's the top one there, Sue? I can't see that. So
try the other side.
Yeah, okay, so learn it on the other side. Actually, that sometimes ends up being a better roll. My roll on the second side I learned on is actually a better roll than the first side I learned on. So you know, you have the skill at that stage. Learn a different roll, such as we mentioned earlier, back deck roll, whatever, Palata roll. Put the paddler under a little pressure, get them to roll and point at something specific when they're up, like a rock or a tree, or if they're in the pool, get them to tell you the time or where the second hand is. Basically what you're trying to do there is when they're up, that they start to concentrate, and that's really good if they're in an active environment such as whitewater or a shoreline in a sea kayak or out in surf. Turn to look for the next wave, they're looking at the next object. It's to focus that when you've rolled, you shouldn't just go, hey, cheer, holler, and you know the next wave hits you. Try some easy freestyle, yeah, because put them into places where they capsize without setting up. Go kayak surfing in small waves, roll in small swell or chop, introduce an outside active element. That could be like just stand in the water beside them and pull the boat gently when they're upside down, so that it puts them body under a little bit of force. Half fill a boat, and then try different paddles or boats. Yeah, just to kind of build that thing. So this is just taken today, just outside the pier at Airlock. So this is outside the area where I was rolling earlier. It's just a little bit of clapotis coming off the wall, and you're just like in a fairly, just a little bit of active environment, just a little bit of bounce. You can see the thing. This is rolling with a set of wings in a Taran 18, slightly bigger boat. Does that feel different? It's slightly narrower. You know, how does that work? Oh, bit of a kick at the end. Have to use the old low brace to stay up. You know, so rolling in different situations, different things. So coming to the end of the session, just any thoughts or suggestions that you might have based on either that last phase or everything or anything, just pop them into Steve, and we'll get Steve then to start fielding some questions. And thanks for staying with us so long. Fair play to you all. Awesome stuff. Okay, Steve, over to you.
No problem. Thanks for that. We've managed to keep pretty much almost everybody. One person said very interesting, totally enjoyable. So Mila Bukas. So they were like, that's one person giving us feedback already. Which is great. Thanks for that. So just a couple of things in following up with the boat side. So someone asked, do you need to be able to roll on both sides, or is there a need for this? And I suppose it's a little bit of it depends question again, but my answer is always, it depends on which side the rock is on. And that's that comes from river paddling, but it might be different somewhere else. So any thoughts on that?
I think I just take it back to what Shane was saying earlier. Like, what do you want to do? What's your aim with your role? Or you just want to have a solid role that works well on one side because you're maybe on grade 2 or sheltered sea, or are you thinking you want to be the next freestyle champion? Well, then you need to be rolling on both sides. So yeah, I think if you've learned to roll on one side, I suppose I'm just a bit nerdy when it comes to learning. I love like learning new things. I like the challenge then of maybe trying to ask, can I do it on the other side?
Yeah, I would agree with that last point. Just do it on the other side. Just start it. Just learn it. You know, if you're happy with a roll on the left with a left anchoring arm, why not? Like, why would you stop?
Yeah, I'd also just say that what Shane was saying about how his second roll became his best one. I've often seen people. So I'm a right-hand roll, so I would set up this way. And maybe if you were teaching a friend, I've seen this happen to students for student on student teaching, and they can roll really well, so they're showing their friend, so the friend just mirrors them, so the friend just ends up with a left-handed roll. And I often wonder, why did you choose to roll on the left side? You know, when you're right-handed, you're like, it's just the way I was taught. So then they get to do their more dominant side. They're like, wow, this is way easier. So just have a think about that as well. You know, what side you're paddling on, or why did you learn to roll on this side? Did somebody ask you, or did you just happen that way?
Cool. Yeah, it can be strange that you'll see people learning different ways because just collectively what they saw around them, and some people will never ever learn about a different particular role or approach to it because it's just the bubble they've been in. So that was any tips in gaining coordination on your weak side. I can roll well on one side, but all sense of body coordination disappears on the other side. So kind of like I remember that it's. Some people would used to say, you know, you have to learn at the same time. You got to learn both sides at the same time. If you learn one above, you know, it's harder for the second. Like, there's a lot of variations on and opinions on that one. In terms of learning, if someone's already got a decent roll on one side, are there any tips or tricks that they want to kind of give themselves a better chance because they have to now go back to thinking about it on the opposite side?
I would say two things to bear in mind. Tempo is the first thing. So your first roll that you learned, which works for you, you've gotten really slick with that. And if you think about somebody hitting a tennis ball, you know, on their forehand, like that's generally, you know, really slick, really awesome. And then they go to hit with a backhand. Now, I know that's not a great analogy, but you know, they need a bit of work on it. They need to work on that a little bit more. You're not going to be as slick as your first roll. When you're learning, you're not going to be as slick as you are with your first roll. So it tends to be too quick. Generally, people try to roll too fast. And the second thing is when you go upside down, when you've learned it on one side, when you go upside down, your knee drive, your brain is programmed to drive with that one knee. So you have to relearn that. And I'd say if that person were to spend a bit of time just capsizing at the edge of the pool or onto a friend's hands or onto a friend's boat and just driving with that other knee, I think they'd solve the problem fairly quickly.
Cool. So this one is, I was asking a lot. Could you demo in your seat or show your body position when you talk about wrapping around and how your body unwinds? I have one little thing here from a book which might help. I don't know if people can see. They'll see this. It might be a little bit difficult with the light,
Yeah.
but it does cover the C shape there. It's a very old book from the 60s.
That's it.
But
Yeah.
This book is from 1966, but it and this is how long it's been around. But that's the little kind of the body going up towards the water now. The boat tilts over a little bit more than modern boats will. But I think that's probably what you're talking about. That body position, the wrapping around, correct?
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. Fair play to you, Steve, for pulling that one out. And I don't think I would be able to demonstrate that here in the seat, to be honest. One of the issues we do have with the role as instructors, and I mean that in honesty, one of the problems we do have, one of the challenges we face as instructors is demonstrating skills which are under the water and upside down, while from an upright position. And very often, especially with the hand position that Sue mentioned, the setup earlier on, like if you do that when you're upright, you capsize, you know. So it's very difficult to help people visualize what's happening there. So that diagram was awesome, Steve. Fair play to you. Yeah.
I would say it is quite hard with gravity, but just turning your shoulders out and then looking down, you know, as if you're trying to get your helmet down. You can try that on the ground, with your kayak sitting on the ground, because you're less likely to fall over, or have someone hold the side of your kayak when you're on the water. But you're trying to get yourself wrapped around at the top of your helmet here. When you're upright, it's almost touching the surface of the water, or vice versa then when you're upside down. So you're out to the side of the kayak, you're way away from it. My deck is here, I'm moving out away from it.
When we were younger, we pulled two seats, two like settee seats together, put our boat nose and tail on the boat, and our shoulders were just barely on the ground, because we were looking. There was no internet when we learned how to roll, so we basically had to. We looked at pictures in books, and we then looked at the picture and then looked at the person hanging upside down between two chairs or two couches, and that's how we figured out the starting position. So people are a little bit luckier today with webinars and internet. So the question.
I would say with tasks, I would say with tasks and exercise like that, like floor exercises are brilliant aid and to help you visualize. But the feeling of water and the buoyancy inherent in water and the traction you get, and it's also like having water in your face, eyes, nose. There's a sensory thing about being underwater, which I love. Not everybody else does. Not everybody does, and definitely your students are strapped in who see themselves as trapped in a kayak. Don't get it, right? But you know, those tasks there, like they're better felt in even shallow water. Makes a difference, you know.
Okay, so a couple of questions here, quick ones in terms of a lot of people are saying thanks very much, and saying that it's good information. The Zoom will be available. Yep, the Zoom will be available on YouTube. They're all going to go up afterwards, so you can watch them back as well. So one of the questions is nose clips, goggles and nose clips, question mark.
Yeah, I use a nose clip. I struggled with my sinus. I'm a broken person really after so many years of different water sports. I use nose clips myself. Of course, the thing about it is you have to put them in before you capsize. So if it's capsize that happens by accident, I don't have the time to do that. Goggles, yeah, anything that helps a person's comfort, anything that helps their comfort is what I'd say. Sue, what do you think?
Yeah, great. I can't. I'm not comfortable with the feel of the water coming right up in here. So if I know I'm going to be practicing rolling, my nose clip goes on, and just saves myself having a snotty nose for a couple of days afterwards, you know. So just looking after yourself, your physical health. But what I would say is try not to use it when you're kayaking, because if it's here and you're thinking, oh, this rapid might turn me over and I might need to roll, well, then you're just physically reinforcing that fear by putting the nose clip on. So I would definitely use it when I'm learning to roll, maybe not trying to put it on every time you're out on the water to preempt that you might capsize, because you're basically physically telling yourself, oh God, I might make a mistake here, you know, just go for it. It's not nice, but if you're only doing the one roll, you know, it's okay. It's going to get water up your nose or you're going to swim, but yeah.
Actually, an interesting point as an instructor to add to that, if you're an instructor and you're putting a group out, is that when they see you put the nose clip on, I didn't realize, like I was teaching a group 2 years ago, and we come sea kayak and we come along an active shoreline, so we're in around between boulders, there's waves crashing, and they see me put the nose clip on because I'm like, oh, this is a bit sporty here, I might have a bit of crack here, and I put the nose clip on. Their heart rate used to elevate, you know, like they started to get scared. They were like, oh my God, there's something big coming, Shane's putting the nose clip on, like this is bad. And they started to relate to that behavior. So like, yeah, I know it's kind of slightly off topic. The person is asking about nose clips and rolling. 100% go for it. If it's comfort, do it.
Yeah, true. Okay. So
and goggles, yeah, if you want to use goggles at the start of goggles or whatever, anything that's going to help you see and understand what you're doing. These are all aids to learning. I love this saying, the process doesn't need to look like the product. You know, how you learn to roll is not meant to look like the polished, finished thing. You know, we're not saying all these little things that we're saying and learn how to do. Yeah, sure, I'm not going to paddle every time I'm in moving water looking at my bottom of my blade. Okay, I'm trying to look where I'm going. But all these little aids, this is the process. This is to get to the finished product. And if those things help you get there, well, then good.
So we got 3 or 4 questions. We're all kind of linked to something here. So how do I find paddle pressure? How do you get your paddle flat? Is the position of the bracing hand important to maintain through the execution of the roll? How do I find paddle pressure? How do you get your paddle flat as the anchor or sweep? And then somebody said, common issue I'm seeing is that the paddle driving right down rather than sweeping, we're just due to be pulling rather than the pushing. Yeah. I find it very hard to explain what I think should be happening. So I think this is about that moment of what you talked about, when whether either the blade is in its starting position or it's got to its anchor position. I think people are talking about that paddle pressure, maybe that hand angle of the bracing hand, and then I think someone is like troubleshooting the pulling rather than pushing.
Not a great. I'm picking the first video that came out actually because it's a set of wings, so they're probably not the best example, but you can actually see the paddle is flat on the surface there. You can just about make it out. Can you? Just about, right? So there's a reason why the paddle dives, and generally it's because as people are falling over, actually, they tend to pull, they tend to twist the paddle towards themselves. Right, and that's just like, you know, if you're falling away from the paddle, your hand just naturally, I'm exaggerating it here, but your hand just naturally goes towards your face. Your knuckles turn towards your face. It's actually a problem with the capsize as opposed to the roll generally. Okay, now this is a very general observation from a lot of people I've taught out of kayak. So what I do end up saying to people is, have you ever driven a motorbike? Well, just before you start the roll, just drop the revs on the motorbike or cock your wrist a little bit, and that helps that feeling of paddle pressure. The other reason you may not be getting too much paddle pressure is that lever moment is too close to the boat. So if people start, can you see my cursor there when I move it? No? Yeah. Okay. So when people bend that elbow, they're trying to do a one-arm chin-up. What it actually does is it pulls the paddle, the anchor paddle too close to the boat. You reduce your leverage and it feels like there's no purchase on the paddle. It feels like the paddle is doing nothing for you. They're just some of the things I've seen. Sue, have you seen anything?
Yeah, I find that on a right-handed roll, that cocking of the wrist works really well, and even just to help with your setup. If you roll your wrist, the paddle kind of slices through the water into position for you. On a left-handed roll, with a traditional right-handed paddle, it's not always the same. You kind of have to be in a little bit more of a neutral position there to help to get the paddle surface. It's the one thing that I was worried about in the webinar, you know, that if people have a question, a very specific question about how we can help them, that I would love to be able to do, but without physically getting hands-on or having water or a boat here to demonstrate and show, it's quite difficult to kind of, to get that across.
Yeah, for the troubleshooting, it sometimes it depends on the paddler. It's very specific. It's body type, it's boat, it's blade, it's everything. So it's kind of hard to give feedback.
I'm sorry if we can't answer your particular question. Yeah, I'm really sorry about that.
Very much. So the learner, should the learner encourage or discourage from driving with their opposite foot to help with the knee drive? Is it a bad habit? I think we talked about there's the driving knee and then the opposite foot, I think, is the one. So it's not a bad habit if I'm correct. That's a good habit. So rolling right side would be right knee drive, left foot push.
Yeah.
To create that fourth moment.
And in this roll here, I hope with this foot is just driving down this side of the boat. Now, all honesty here, I'd love to put sensors all over a boat someday with someone who's paddling, and love to have somebody who knows how to read sensors and set timers so that we can find out exactly how much force and what's happening with different people. The big answer there is I actually really don't know how effective that foot is. But that's what seems to have worked. Chatting to different people, they seem to apply that, but the jury's out from my point of view. But if you are going to push, try to push with the top with this leg, and if you're in doubt, just push with both. That'd be my suggestion.
Also, if a lot of the time when you're thinking about what to give in terms of feedback, is go do it yourself and ask yourself the questions incrementally, as in, what am I doing with my left foot? What am I doing with my right foot? What am I doing with my head? What, and that'll help you maybe come back to people. And I've often done that and paddled away. And when someone asks you, what are you doing with the something? And I'll paddle away and do it and then come back and go, well, I think I'm doing this. And it's a bit of a collaborative experience to say, because you might have already, that might have become automatic, or it might have become something you don't longer think about. So you have to go back and sometimes do that.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. So someone talked about, sorry, could you please repeat what was meant by in terms of paddler readiness, what paddle and boat literacy means?
No problem.
So someone wanted to clarify on that.
So here we go. Are they ready to learn this skill? So well, put it to you this way: if somebody is struggling to paddle a boat forward in a relatively straight line for 30 or 40 meters, they need other skills before you be teaching them the roll. What sort of indications should they start to be able to demonstrate for you before you start introducing them to learn the roll? Maybe that's the way we ask the question, like, what should they be showing me as an instructor before I start introducing the roll to them? So I think an awful lot of the foundations there on that triangle we shared earlier, like a little bit of confidence capsizing. They can do an Eskimo rescue or a tap rescue or a T rescue, whatever you call that, that they can start to understand how to hold a boat on edge. I think having that idea of knowing how to hold a boat, and that combination of glute, your bum cheek, and your knee to hold a boat up on edge. I think these are all skills that people are starting to show you, that they're starting to say, yeah, I'm kind of ready for the roll now. The other paddler readiness one is like, how do you do that? It's a great one, isn't it? Like when they ask you, hey, can I roll? Yeah, sure, no problem. Seen you do it before. Paddle literacy and boat literacy is basically how they're moving in the boat. So is it all new? Is it all new? So they're not really fluid in the boat just yet. Does it look a bit disjointed? Does it look a bit, whereas somebody with good paddle and boat literacy, it's starting to become part of their body. I know that Canoeing Ireland, through their training scheme, have put levels on this. Like, so when we start to see somebody showing paddle and boat literacy, we usually call it level 2, right? They're starting to show some level of control over the boat. And that's generally when they start to knock on the door of the role, like asking questions about it. So to put a level on it, level 2 maybe, but obviously it varies from person to person.
Cool. Well, we still got a good few more questions, but I'm just looking at the time here. We've been on an hour for 45, which is expected for with the size of this topic as well. There's lots more to go into, and we could go in. There's lots more questions, and we're getting into the weeds as a lot of specific types of our kind of descriptions of scenarios. So rather than going into that, what we can do is we're probably going to leave it there. There was a question just in terms of would Canoeing Ireland do canoe or rolling sessions for newbies, and the question is that we kind of do, in terms of what Shane is, in terms of we may not be like some other countries, which is a whole different topic in terms of the way they approach rolling from day one. But that's a different there's different thoughts on that as well. But more from the point of view of that if people are going out and they are getting out paddling, a lot of the providers, a lot of the instructors, they do have, especially after that CPD and after that change, that people have started to bring this into their practice and their teaching. So a lot of the instructors out there will be able to facilitate those sessions for newbies. If you do have a bunch of people who are out there and they're looking for that, maybe not even a trip or a paddle, but just a series of coaching or a series of instructing over rolling and maybe going through these incremental steps, you can just contact providers and Canoeing Ireland providers and ask them, because that's really where you're going to get that kind of expertise. The other thing is then, as I said, this video will be available up online. It'll be up on YouTube, on the Canoeing Ireland YouTube channel, and there'll also be a kind of link to that on our social media and things like that. So there's, as part of this process, as part of this kind of workshops and wellness, what we're doing a lot for the next couple of for this year is definitely trying to increase the frequency in which we open up these topics for discussion, talk with instructors, talk with paddlers, talk with clubs. And we're going to go through this both in the workshop series, which finishes up soon, but also then that leads into symposium, and then that leads into a lot of contact and communication and connection with the paddlers out there. After COVID, it's a good idea for everybody to get back together and chatting, and also kind of sharing a bit of practice so that people get to both discuss things that they may have had questions with, but also input into how we set things up in the future. So thanks everybody for that. I think the guys said that if you need to contact them, both Sue is available at info@gopaddle.ie, I think.
Yeah. Feel free, get in touch. I always offer people ask questions. Sorry, my dog has just come in here. I always offer people to ask questions, and they never do. So it's not like I'm bombarded with questions. If you have a question about rolling, please do get in touch.
Brilliant. And then also Shane at shanemcgelligot.gmail.com.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. McElligot.shane@gmail.com.
Oh, sorry.
So my second name, and there's 2 T's actually, it's spelled wrong there. I need to adjust that.
That's your spelling. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's no problem.
So it's McElligot.shane@gmail.com. Best thing people can do is just take a photo of the name there, add a T to it, and at Gmail, and I'd be happy to take. And can I just say as well, Steve, thanks very much for inviting us to be a part of this. It's a fantastic initiative, and to Hannah, Craig as well for doing some of the back breaking work on it.